Welcome everyone to our July monthly call on summer heat and climate resiliency. All right, we're going to get started. People are still joining us. Welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kira Dalt. I am the Communications and Strategic Initiatives Director at Faith in Place and the Faith in Place Action Fund. I am so delighted that you are all joining us tonight. I think we've got a great call. Summer heat and climate resiliency, we are in the middle of it. So I think it's a great time to be joining, and I'm so glad that you are all here to learn with us. All right. So our mission at Faith in Place is cultivating a powerful multi-faith movement working for environmental justice through connection, education, and advocacy. And our vision is spiritual communities leading the way in healing our relationships with each other and the earth to build just, resilient, thriving communities. And the big one, our theory of change, is that we believe the environmental crisis is a spiritual crisis rooted in disconnection from one another, our traditions, and the earth. When green teams are supported in repairing these relationships, they grow networks of care and action that lead to more just and resilient communities. Okay, we work in Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. We know many of you may be joining us from other locations, but we are so glad that you're here. All right, a little bit of housekeeping before we really get into the meat of things. Just some norms for our call. Remember that we are a multi-faith community, so please, we act with respect toward one another. Listen to understand. We know that we don't always have clear answers, and so we listen to try to make sense of what we can. Take space and make space. This is always a good one. Hold space for people's lived experiences. Also, if you notice that you're really talking a lot or something like that, maybe hold back a little bit, make some space. But also, if you notice that you're not saying much, feel free to take up some space. And then we are on a Zoom call. So if you are not speaking, please do keep your mic on mute. That helps everyone to experience the call and to hear. And then ask for help. If you have technical problems, you can drop in the chat, request Faith in Place to help you out, and we will try to make sure that you get the full Faith in Place experience. All right, we're going to do one more thing here, which is we want you to rename yourself. So you're going to go onto your video screen and find the three dots and drop in the drop-down menu, you're going to select rename. And then what we'd like you to do is add the region number that you are calling from before your name. And that way we can move you into the correct breakout room at the end of our talk when we go into our small group sessions. And we're going to bring up the numbers right now that you can add to your name. And we'll drop them in the chat as well. Okay. Thank you all for doing that and for joining me on this housekeeping journey. I now want to pass the mic to Wade Halva for our centering moment and our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Kira. I'm Wade Halva, Faith in Place's Regional Programs Manager, and I'm calling in tonight from Marion, Illinois. And tonight I'm going to ask us to think about where we are a bit differently than we've done in the past. We're each on land that we're not the only occupants of, and over time, many, many, many folks have lived where we are. Each of them and each of us have shaped the land and the environment through their and our interactions. And some of those we know in great detail, and others we only know the names of communities, and still others we know even less about. They've all held the land and shaped the environments we now call home. Here, there have been settlers, and the streets of the towns are named after them, and before them, the Quapaw, Osage, Miamia, Oglala Sioux, Kaskaskia, Kickapoo. Before them, this was the land of the mound builders, the Mississippians who built the city of Cahokia. We've lost the names and the stories of those who came before them. After us will come our children and grandchildren and their children and grandchildren. Your grandchildren may move to where I am, and mine may move to where you are. How the land is shaped when they arrive will dictate how they live. Some have left deep marks on the land, and others have barely disturbed the land. We have much to learn from those who pass gently for our own passage on the land. My part of the world has been gouged deeply to mine coal and extract oil. The rivers have been rerouted, the trees cut down and sent downstream. The land has been farmed to exhaustion and replanted with forest. The landscape has changed from footpaths and horse trails to river and railroad, now to interstate highways, from small family farms to wide expanses of corn and soy, moved from walkable small towns needing a car to get anywhere and everywhere. From gathering food in our backyards or small markets, we now drive to a grocery store, a convenience store, liquor store, or a Dollar General to buy food that's been trucked in from all over. Just this year, we've seen our landscape changed by ice storms, flooding, and tornadoes here in this part of Southern Illinois. So as we enter our time together tonight to talk about summer heat and climate resiliency, I want us to take a moment and consider how we ourselves are leaving our mark on the places we call home. Are we leaving marks that are deep and ugly, or is our touch light and in passing? What can we learn from those who've gone before us, touching the earth lightly, that we may pass on soil, air, and water that will nourish those who come after us? Are our homes, yards, and communities exposed to the bright, warm sun, or shaded by trees that provide relief? Where can we escape to the heat? Here I escaped cool waters and cold stone bluffs, shaded spaces, and cooling breezes. Where do you go in your community? When we design our communities, are we using the wisdom of those who've gone before us to create buffers from wind and water, shelter from storm and sun, shade and light to assist us through our days? Or do we just trust the thermostat will be enough and that we can pay our energy bills? How can our conversation about heat impact not just us, but the land we care for, the communities we live in, and the future we leave to those who will follow us? And last, but certainly not least, what do our respective faiths and spiritualities teach us about our role in our communities as those who show hospitality and welcome? It's now my privilege to turn the mic over to Elena.
Thank you, Wade. That was a beautiful grounding reflection. Good evening, everyone. I am Elena. I'm the COO of Faith and Place, and I'm going to be offering some general announcements before we get into today's topic. So you can see on the screen the announcements, and there's links which will be added to the chat so you can learn more about each of these or register to join us. So the first, which our staff team is all going to Chicago to join, is our Double Dutch Fest. So that is this Saturday, and it's in the Chicago South Shore area. So if you are in that region, it is a very fun festival, and you can learn more about what's involved and register for free through the bit.ly link. And then we also are looking forward to our annual Environment and Spirituality Summit, which will be in September. And as you can see on the screen, Robin Wall Kimmerer is our keynote speaker. So we'll have 4 different sessions over 2 days, and you can learn about each of those sessions and register for free on our website, which is aes-summit.org. And while you're registering, you'll also see a list of watch party sites. And what we're going to do is, during the keynote address, we'll have some local in-person watch parties. So you can join other people in your community if you're near a watch party site and watch Robin Wall Kimmerer's keynote address together. And then there'll be some discussion afterwards. So all the sessions are available virtually. And then if you're registering and you're located near a watch party, definitely sign up to join one of those. You can just click the site you're closest to when you're registering. And we are also excited to share that our 2024 annual report is out. There's lots of beautiful photos and stories in there. So if you'd like to have a glimpse of what our organization and community did last year. Check out that. And I think we celebrated Nick joining last month, but if anyone wasn't here, I just wanted to share that we have a new Illinois outreach director, Nick, who's joined our team, and we are so excited to have them. And so if you are part of our Illinois community, you will have received a newsletter from Nick, and they're now an additional person to support and be there for connecting with your community. So feel free to reach out to them if you have any questions. If you got our most recent newsletter for Illinois, you'll see more about Nick and their background and everything they're bringing. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kira.
All right, thanks, Elena. Generally at this time in the call, we have a brief advocacy moment. And so I'm going to just reflect for a moment, because at our last monthly call back in June, we were really working hard to do what we could to advocate against the federal budget bill that recently passed. And so last week, the president did sign into law this so-called Big Beautiful Bill. I think we all know that this bill is very harmful. It's going to bring real challenges and to many of our communities. So I'm not going to rehearse all of those harms because we know them. Sometimes advocacy, frankly, is about defense. It's about chipping away whatever harmful provisions we can, however small. And this bill is very bad. But because many people, us included, really raised our voices and we got loud, there were some really bad provisions that were taken out. A few of them. The original version included expedited permitting for pipelines. That got removed. The original version had penalties for electric and hybrid vehicles. Those got removed too. And the final version added funding for really important agricultural programs that just weren't there before. So these wins feel so small in a lot of ways. And we know that so many people and communities are still going to suffer because of it. But as small as the wins are, they did happen because we showed up together loudly and persistently. So now's the time we press on, we keep showing up, and we keep reminding our elected officials that they work for us. And so right now, as the federal government really fails to meet the moment, we are turning our focus to where we can make some progress, and that's state and local governments. So our leaders and leaders at state and local levels really do have tools to protect our communities. And so we're going to be putting our energy into even more state and local advocacy. We want to build up the structures that we need so that our communities can be resilient, just, and thriving. We're going to drop a link in the chat, and we want to invite you to sign up for the Faith in Place Action Team. When you sign up, you'll be alerted when there's an opportunity to raise your voice again, because as we all know, we are louder and stronger when we raise our voices together. So thank you for joining us. Now on to the main event, which this all feels connected. We often like to start these calls with kind of a short story or a timely moment to help ground us into the topic. So here we are. I think all of us are in the middle of a summer that feels kind of hotter than ever. It got hot. I'm in Chicago, so it got very hot very quickly. Feels like we've been 4 weeks into 90-degree weather. And most of us this past week have also really watched in horror as flash floods swept through Texas, and the just catastrophe that has been. And we want to send out prayers and love to all of those folks. But here we are in this era of climate change, and our communities really need to find new and creative ways to care for one another and to build that local strength. And so that's why I'm so excited to introduce tonight's guest. Nick Smaligo serves as the Community Resilience Liaison for Indiana University's Center for Rural Engagement. He holds a PhD in philosophy from Southern Illinois University Carbondale, and long ago authored a book called The Occupy Movement Explained. And he lives in Bloomington, Indiana with his family. As Nick is speaking, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. We will have an opportunity for a Q&A, and seeing them in the chat is sort of the best way for us to access those questions. So please do drop those in the chat. And now join me in giving a warm welcome to Nick. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Kira and Dan, for inviting me. I will say also, it's beautiful to see some folks from Southern Illinois on here. I lived there for about 15 years before I moved to Indiana a couple of years ago and got this job. Yeah, it's just an honor to talk to you all about community resilience hubs. This talk is going to have 3 parts. First, I'm going to tell you a bit about a project I'm involved with to build a network of community resilience hubs here in libraries around Southern Indiana. And this is in its early stages, but the aim of my kind of introducing it is to give you a concrete idea about what a community resilience hub can be. And then I'm going to put on my philosopher cap and complicate that clear idea. We're going to talk a little bit about the ambiguity and maybe even the paradox in the use of the term resilience and some risks that that poses. And I apologize in advance, but the philosopher in me won't be satisfied unless I really complicate it for you. And then finally, because I also try my best to be a nice person, I'm going to give some suggestions for ways through this complication so you can start building hubs in your communities with an eye for some of those pitfalls. So that's the plan. Sorry, I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'm just going to talk at you if that's okay. Okay, by way of introduction, I'm going to say some things that I suspect you all know. We know that the Earth's climate systems are changing. We're facing more heat, more intense storms, more drought. And we know that we've known this was coming for decades. So for decades, we've known essentially that the conditions of our lives in developed countries were destroying the conditions for habitable life on the planet. And you could say this increasingly widespread awareness posed a historical challenge to all of us. Could we rapidly transform our lives from their reliance on fossil fuels, deforestation, soil depleting agriculture, and a dozen other factors driving us to ecological tipping points? And the answer so far also, as you know, is no. Now, during the last US administration, there was a glimmer of the possibility that we were finally going to make a hard push in this direction with massive investments into the EPA and other agencies for climate justice, essentially. And these have been largely withdrawn or tied up in the courts, with some notable exceptions. But obviously, the current administration has chosen to put its foot on the gas in the other direction. So strategies of mitigation of the conditions driving ecological collapse are, for the moment, off the table through all channels of government. So strategies of adaptation are what remain to us. And community resilience hubs are a strategy of adaptation. They involve taking a place, usually a building, and turning it into a site that can be of use during periods of punctuated disaster, a power outage, a heat wave, a flood in the area, and really any other things that, a long list of possible things that could cause disruptions. So whenever a disaster like this happens, there are usually generous and spontaneous expressions of mutual aid that emerge. Many years ago, when I was in Carbondale during a derecho, an inland hurricane that knocked power out for a week. And during this time, local businesses turned on their gas grills and cooked mass meals. People emptied out their freezers and barbecued in the street every night. And it was really, for me, a deeply impactful experience. Now, a community resilience hub is a bit different from those spontaneous expressions of mutual aid. because it invites us to plan in advance for such moments, which we know are on the horizon. So organizers of a hub might install solar panels and backup batteries to make sure that even if the grid goes down, people still have access to electricity and air conditioning. They might stockpile certain foods and medicines that might be difficult to access in an emergency. And they might make plans for how to check in on vulnerable people and have supplies for navigating flooded areas, just for example. In other words, a community resilience hub is built by and for the needs of the community that it's serving. The more people from different places and walks of life that are included in the process of developing it and engaged in its ongoing growth and maintenance, the more useful it's going to be. Personally, I started thinking about resilience hubs a few years ago in response to a grant opportunity, and I've been working with folks from the Environmental Resilience Institute here at Indiana University, as well as Groundswell, which is a national organization that builds resilience hubs. And we've been working on a project to build them in libraries throughout southern Indiana. And libraries are, in many ways, perfect spots for this because they already make tremendous efforts to be open and accessible to all. They already serve as informal cooling centers for many people, as well as sites where people get connected with social services. And so we're working on getting solar panels and backup batteries installed in order to encourage residents to begin organizing their own plans for disaster responses within those spaces. And we also think that building not just isolated hubs, but a network of hubs is an important step. So each one will be serving its local community, but will have moments regularly for folks from each hub to compare experiences and learn from each other and hopefully collaborate in different kinds of emergency scenarios that affect either one place or the whole region. In addition, we've been very lucky to build a relationship with the Sisters of St. Benedict. So anyone in Indiana might have heard of them, but they have a gorgeous monastery that is in Ferdinand, Indiana. And their aim is to build that both into a kind of large-scale super hub that could potentially house displaced people, but also into a center for ecological education and wider cultural impact. So they're in the process now of installing geothermal heating for the building, and also will hopefully get funds to install solar as well. Part of what has been so amazing about working with the sisters, who are an 1,100-year-old religious community that practices a form of direct democracy internally, is that it puts our moment in this bigger time scale than most of us think in. Few of us think about communities that are 1,000 years old. And that also raises questions about just what, a resilient community is or might be. So now I'm going to complicate some of this stuff. And this kind of starts with asking what is meant by the word resilience. Folks hear it, in some ways it's like replaced the word sustainability in many discourses. The word comes out of physics and then moves into ecology, and it very abstractly refers to the ability of a system to maintain its integrity in the face of change. So a physical object's ability to hold its shape when exposed to heat, say, or an ecological system like a pond's ability to maintain certain species in response to, say, a pipe dumping toxins nearby. So resilience is a measure of a system's ability to resist change from outside of it. Now, let's move this to community resilience, where we're talking about human communities. Things suddenly get a little strange. What is the inside and the outside of a human community? Who draws that boundary? Does everyone within a community draw the boundaries the same way? Whose voice is authoritative on behalf of a community? Whose is less so? So the word community often covers up deep differences and even fractures that disrupt it. But there's more, and this is the paradox that I referred to. So resilience is a community's capacity to resist changes, but building resilience is itself an active process of changing a community. So what are we doing? Are we changing or not changing? Are we changing some things in order to better not change other things? Which things are we changing? Which ones aren't? Who decides? How? These are some of the questions that, my own job title kind of opens up for me. But I hope that that was confusing. And there's one more level, which will also, I hope, help us out of it. So whenever we're talking about human social life, we're always talking about these different levels of structures. There's a political level with its elected officials and experts and police and things like this. Then that's closely integrated with an economic level, with businesses, the role of private property as it currently exists, money. And then there's also like households, neighborhoods, churches, community organizations, and each of these have their own structures. And each of us participate in multiple ones of these, making them interact in ways that are sometimes harmonious, sometimes in tension, sometimes in conflict. I'm using this word structure and levels. This can be mysterious, but what I'm talking about is patterns of action in our lives, the things we do in our lives that maintain our households, our churches, our political systems, and so on. And we do things to keep them all going. If we didn't do them, or if someone didn't, then they wouldn't exist. So all of these patterns of actions are guided by values. This can also be a mysterious word. But what I mean is judgments about what actions are important and what actions are less important. We're always making these judgments, and these judgments are reflective of our values. So back to community resilience. This is the point that I'm very laboriously getting at. It means nothing unless we specify what values we are trying to bring forward. There is no resilience without specifying what specifically we want to make resistant to change. In any use of the term resilience or community that doesn't clarify the values of who is speaking about it, it is kind of empty. And there is a danger in empty speech like that. It's not inconsequential, because when we make any set of values resilient, it requires organized people who are coordinating their actions in the world. The values that are carried forward are the ones that are held by the people who are better organized to introduce them, to assert them sometimes. So when we open, for example, a community resilience hub, without clarifying what values we want it to serve, who we want it to serve, and what the values we don't want it to serve are. We invite any other organized group in that will end up shaping those values regardless of what we want. So one of the most interesting things about situations that we think of as disasters is that they often lead to a tremendous clarification of our values. Suddenly, it's clear to us what our real priorities are, what the patterns of action we do, versus what are the patterns of action that we engage in that are just out of habit or convenience, and what are the ones that are reflective of our real priorities. Oftentimes in disasters, people suspend certain rules of private property, for example, to distribute what is needed in the situation where our intense vulnerability is exposed. Now, in disaster situations, we often see this quite powerfully. I recently spoke with a group who was organizing in response to flooding in North Carolina last year. And they talked about how, it's a crazy story, really, but one of the things that eventually took off in the city of Asheville was setting up outdoor showers and bathrooms for people who had just recently lost their homes to the floods. But then a few months later, they noticed how once the disaster was officially declared to be over, they removed all of this stuff. And that left houseless people, including many who were newly unhoused, without those resources that had for a moment been shared with everybody freely. And so this kind of gets to what for me is really the big question when we're thinking about community resilience and disaster preparedness for communities is, who gets to determine what the disaster is? We've been speaking of these punctuated disasters. in these times when suddenly our vulnerability is exposed to us. But what if the actual disasters are not seeing that mutual connection and vulnerability every day? So here's where I want to plug a really beautiful book by a friend of mine named Adam Greenfield, and it's called Lifehouses: Taking Care of Ourselves in a World on Fire. And Adam is a designer based in the UK, and he's specifically thinking about the possibilities that thousands of empty church buildings in the UK could hold for, well, really, he's reflecting on his own experience during Hurricane Sandy in 2012. And having participated in this process of many thousands of people suddenly coordinating for mutual aid disaster response throughout New York City, he's talking about the kind of sense of life and purpose that was unleashed by people engaged in helping each other during these times. And he's asking, what would it take to make this kind of energy, this explosion of meaningful activity in our lives that disasters tend to catalyze, what would it take to make that permanent? So what would it take for us to see ourselves within that disaster and to allow our values, which means our judgments about what actions are important and admirable, to be clarified by that fact every day? So my invitation to you is this: form community resilience hubs or life houses or whatever you would like to call them, because it's not the concept that matters, but the actions that it refers to. And consider the hub less a particular place and more a group of people dedicated toward clarifying your own values together and toward organizing to bring them into the world. It could be called a church. The point is a change in your collective way of perceiving the world. How do you see everything in your neighborhood, in your town, as potential materials to build a life raft that holds everyone, with the people who are already suffering at the center? And maybe you can start building it immediately. And maybe you are making plans for how these things will be used for the common good when the usual patterns of action are suspended. If you can find ways to fund solar and other resources, go for it, but don't let the search for that funding hold you up. Keep things oriented toward the needs that are already being unmet by the most vulnerable among you, and the practices built to address those needs will prepare you for the inevitable moments when the everyday disasters accelerate into something that can't be ignored by everyone else. And practice for those moments. Create day or weekend-long scenarios where your church or other organization live action role play a power outage, for example. Invite everyone to participate who you think you would want to work with in such a situation. But keep in mind that disasters are often defined by the inability for official agencies such as police to respond. So consider doing it as a community thing where the disaster involves the inability to rely upon some of the higher level structures. And finally, begin from what people are already doing. If there are informal community resilience hubs already present, places where people are gathering to meet their needs together in the slow disaster, go there, hang out, learn from them, ask how the resources you have can be put in common to improve their situation. Because this is the insight that what we call disasters brings. When we lose the everyday, we lose the illusion of our separation and are exposed to our common vulnerability in the face, not just of the Earth's systems, but also the all too human forces that are wrecking them. That's it. I feel like maybe that was way quicker than I expected.
Well, then we have some time for conversation and discussion. I want to thank you so much for such beautiful insights. So everyone, yeah, so let's give a round of thanks to Nick. And also, I don't see any questions or anything in the chat yet, but I'd love, so toward the end, I'll get us started and then
Do
maybe
it. Do it.
okay.
Yeah.
So So toward the end, you started talking about live action role play and for sort of community disasters. And I love this idea partly because I love LARP just as a concept. I'm not personally a LARPer, but I think it's a great idea. This idea of practice. So, but I'm wondering because sometimes just imagining a scenario that does not necessarily involve emergency response people, right?
Mhm.
So police or things like that. Um, do you have any ideas for just a practical scenario that maybe let's say a small community could organize to practice around?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really it's a matter of how creative you want to get with it, right? And how creative your neighbors want to get with it. And so this is an idea that when I was in Carbondale, I was working with somebody on developing, but we never got a chance to really play it out. But there's other contexts in which I feel like something similar has happened. So at the kind of basic entry level, this could just be like, hey, let's all have a cookout together, right? And just, a neighborhood-based cookout. The people that should something really punctuated happen, that you would want to be there to check on you, right? But also that you would check on, right? And it could be an intentional conversation around it, or maybe if you don't know your neighbors at all, then just something to get people talking together. But if you do want to have more intentional conversations around this, then you could make it quite fun. And it doesn't even have to be a full day, right? You could just say, hey, let's do for our neighborhood a 4 hour blackout. And let's just see like how that goes, right? And in that process, right, you might have, I mean, the way that I was thinking about it would be to actually do some game design. So every hour people get a different card of an event that's happened that then they have to respond to together or something like that. You could really turn it into a fun game. But the point is to have this kind of temporary experience where suddenly we're like, okay, what food do you have lying around? What food do you have lying around? Who knows how to work the grill? Who knows how to, if one of the scenarios is like a tree's fallen down in there, like who has a chainsaw, who has these things, right? And so to create this kind of imaginary scenario where you can start, you can start exploring these questions together. And yeah, I just think it would be fun to see that take off.
I love that idea. So let's get to it. Okay, so Sharon asks, how does this concept fit with organizations such as Red Cross Aid or aid through our churches in a given area, and outside that to the wider world? Is this thought a way to connect together for resources, and what plans work and which tend to fail?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of my thinking about this is influenced by a group called Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, which, if somebody wants to look up their website, is great. And part of what their whole organizing model is based on is that the people that are best positioned to respond in a situation of a disaster tend to be the people who are most directly already there, right? Your neighborhood. They're the people that tend to know what the kind of actual contours of the neighborhood are, who needs to be checked in on, who doesn't. And so, and a lot of other kind of larger groups, which can do really great work, they have their own kind of, process of moving, and they often come late, and which is just a fact of how they're organized. But then also, I mean, I will say, um, insofar as a different set of priorities sometimes emerges here, where often, the state's priority is the restoration of a certain kind of order, which isn't necessarily what people on the ground think is what's necessary to meet their immediate needs. So there's conflicts that sometimes emerge in these situations. And so what mutual aid disaster relief does is it organizes on the basis that the community directly affected is going to be the best prepared to respond. And so how do we start upping the ability for those communities to prepare in advance, to accumulate resources, to accumulate knowledge about one another? That's going to be helpful and even life-saving in those situations. Does that kind of get at the question?
I think so. I will let Sharon add to the chat if she wants further clarification. Or anyone else for that matter, add to the chat. So Wade asked, our ice storm this winter made it really hard to get people to any shelters. And I think he's asking for a little bit of imaginative work from you here.
Yeah.
What might be possible for groups of neighbors in this case?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is like exactly the kind of question that groups of neighbors should start immediately, like, asking themselves. And so it really is a matter of what resources are around you. Do folks, have larger houses? Do some people have wood stoves or, forms of heating that makes them somewhat less reliant upon the grid? And if so one is kind of collectively changing your gaze on the resources that are around you. And then two is, well, if it turns out, we don't have those resources, then what would it look like for us to say, these ice storms are probably going to keep coming. What does it look like for us to have a plan next time that doesn't require us to drive far, and really you can use your imaginations together because there might be solutions that I can't even think about. I mean, one thing though is like if there's a garage that could actually be a warm site if it had some more insulation, or if it had a wood stove in it, is that something that a neighborhood wants to work on together because this is going to be of use for people? But I don't know. That's just my first thought.
All right, thank you. So let's see. Ray asked, is there a checklist of things a facility would need to be considered, need to be considering when considering to become a resiliency hub, right? So yeah.
There are, I imagine that there are existing checklists. Kind of the point that I'm trying to make is that that's a checklist that ultimately, you all should make together. And you can look online and Groundswell has some great resources about community resilience hubs that they have built. But also their process is a community engaged participatory process. And so if there's things that aren't on some official checklist, then that's great, right? Because that means that people are thinking for themselves and thinking about what their needs are that maybe don't fit into the boxes constructed from other groups' needs.
Okay, great. Let's see.
Yeah.
I think this is just that Terry had just a clarification. The Resiliency Hub would be addressing the needs of what is needed in the community at a given moment. That sort of.
So oftentimes when we're thinking about this, we're thinking about preparing for something in the future. And partly what I'm trying to suggest is that the best way to prepare for that in the future is to start it right now. And so I'm trying to kind of extend our thinking about it from just a given moment that we're imagining in the future to starting to see it as an everyday practice. And this is what the Lifehouses stuff really emphasizes, is like, how do we start to turn this into an everyday practice of responding to a bigger and deeper and emergency together?
Thank you. This is so great. I'm having a great time. Okay. So let's see. Janelle, sorry, asks, is there a certain size that functions better? Like, and I can identify with this. How many blocks would define a community?
That is a great question. And I think this is part of like the ambiguity of the word community, right? And so, if here's a way that there's a whole kind of organizing tool called pod-based organizing, which kind of asks you to take, oftentimes when people refer to communities, they are speaking kind of vaguely. And so it kind of walks you through an exercise of being like, okay, if you needed X or Y, or if if your power went off, like whose house would you go to? Do you have that person like in mind? Or what are the three people that you would call or try to get in touch with in this situation? And so it kind of challenges you to specify who is your kind of, they call it your pod, and then also to invite those people to ask, who are in your pod, like who's in their pod. It might not just be you or the same people, right? And so to kind of get clearer than this concept of community usually is about, just what are the relationships that you really depend on and that you would need or that you would hope would be there for you in these circumstances. And then the next step is to really work on cultivating those relationships beyond those boundaries, right? Like a lot of us are really isolated, and loneliness is this epidemic, as they say. And so to this is a kind of organizing project to really try to meet people who are isolated, or who, for whatever reason, are the kinds of people that you would actually like to be in a more intimate pod-like relationship with you, which is a weird word, but and so maybe that's a way to say it, like who or another way maybe to turn it around is say who would you feel responsible for in that, Janelle, in terms of your, is it the people on your block? Is it the people around your block? Either way, even if it's just the people on your block, there's going to be some relationship with those others. And so the wider you can start these conversations about what to do in these different scenarios, that's also a process of kind of building that in reality, of building that community, I hope.
I think that's really lovely. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions before we adjourn and go to breakout rooms. But I do wonder if so I'm gonna highlight a few different questions, and then we're gonna make it dealer's choice. You get to choose. Okay. So first, Sharon gave a follow-up that in our city, we tend to be frustrated with the failure to be proactive instead of mostly reactive. At this time in history, it seems like people are less comfortable coming together. So asking kind of how can we repair this? There's also a question from Brian that I think is related and might be illustrative. He's just asking for maybe an example that you might like to highlight of how a group may have done this, or either in history or any houses of worship or communities that you've been working with that have kind of successfully navigated some of this, even if it's let's say maybe not completely, but a partial success or whatever.
I'm reading through
Yeah.
these also
Okay.
here, and yeah, I mean, there's so much to discuss. If I only have one, though, I was gonna just do the first one because it's, I think, a really
Go
profound
for it.
question, and also,
Kind
for
of gets at the heart
sure.
of it, right?
Yeah. Here's my kind of wager, because you're saying, this issue about people being reactive. I mean, I'm just gonna put this out as a hypothesis. I think that collectively we're in a process of mourning right now. And part of that is a kind of reality testing. Like, is this really what's happening? Is this really it? Um, and that's an easy thing to get caught in, but it is also something that like deserves its space. And so if you and plenty of people are not, plenty of people have mourned in our through to the other side and are acting in the world. If you have the energy to act, to move forward, then you should just do that. And courageous action and inspiring action and action that's just genuinely, directly, and obviously serving people, that is contagious and it resonates with people and it undercuts a lot of the easy kind of, obstacles around ideas or political categories or other things. And so like, find the people that have the energy to act and do something together. And it doesn't have to be big or grand. It can be small. Maybe it's better if it's small, and then reflect on it and do something else together, And for all those people that are kind of waiting in the wings, you're giving them a gift by doing that, because you're showing them that there is a path on the other side of what they're moving through on their own. And to the extent that you can also make spaces for people just to grieve together, to just let out what they're struggling with, what they're confused about, without providing necessarily answers, but just to be heard by others. That is also really, really important. And I think that this is a time in which something like that is really necessary. And it sounds like, Faith in Places probably does things just like this already, because of its practice. But you all know as well as anybody that the challenges and the lives that are in front of us require a deep spiritual shift. And so making the space for people to do that on their own time, while inviting them and showing them that there's possibilities on the other side of that is I think really important.
That's so lovely, and I think that's a really great place to wrap up. Unless you have final words that you would like to offer, okay. So I want to
Yes,
thank you.
I appreciate
I
it.
want to thank you so much for this. This is, I think, been really thought-provoking, and deeply meaningful. I think that we all have now a lot to think about. And so, so everyone, let's give Nick another round of applause. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us today. Okay, so now, so everyone, we are going to make the transition to head to breakout rooms to talk together. And so if you haven't already put your number by your name, now is a great time to do that. We're going to drop the numbers in the chat again. This is just to help us sort you into your regionally appropriate breakout rooms. And then also we have just a couple of questions or a couple of calls to action for you. We have some homework, which is one, a lot of towns, municipalities, counties have community climate resilience plans in place. So this would be a great time to find out what that kind of formal structure is. I know we want to work on building that community structure, that less formal structure, but find out what your local emergency management or disaster management or climate resilience plan is. If there's not one, reach out to your elected officials and ask that one be made. and then ask how those things are being distributed. So we want to make sure that we know all those things. And when you go and meet with your Faith in Place regional staff, just give that information to them. We want to help collect that information at Faith in Place so we kind of know what we're all about. Okay, and so finally, I just want to give a huge thank you again to Nick. Thank you for joining us and for that beautiful talk. And now we are going to head to our breakout rooms. So I want you to bear with us as our comms team puts us into those rooms. Sometimes it'll take a few minutes. If you're having trouble, let us know. You can drop a note in the chat. Brian, hold your hand up a little bit more. Are you 4? Okay. Okay. Brian Bunzel is 4, so we're gonna move him into 4. We got you. Okay. Anyone else? If you need to, let's see, Sharon, I see that you're in 7. So if you're in none of the above, you may choose a breakout room that you would like to join. So Sharon, is there any particular region that you would like to join? You are welcome anywhere you want to be.
Yeah, the hard part for me is I'm from Connecticut, so I'm not quite sure where to go here.
Are you from a more urban area or a more rural?
Yeah, it is a more urban, and I live on the outskirts.
Okay, how about if we send you to, would you like to join a suburb area or Chicago?
I think a suburb area might be better. We're still a small, I mean, I think our city is not even half the size of New York, so
Okay,
it's
great.
much smaller.
So let's send Sharon to room 3. We'll send you with our Chicago suburbs.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Rose, do you have a room that you would like to join?
I'm in Wisconsin.
Okay, great. So let's send Rose to room 4. Okay, and let's see. Ellie, I see you put 7, so you're none of the above. What room would you like to join?
I don't know. I'm from Seattle.
You're from Seattle? Okay. Do you live in Seattle? Would you like to join?
I live in the city. Yeah, I live inside the city. So
Okay, how about if you join Chicago? We don't have exactly the same challenges, but it is an urban center.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Gretchen, let's see. Where would you like to go?
I'm in central Arizona. Heat and urban would be.
Okay.
Chicago, I don't know, unless you've got
Okay, sure. No, we can. Chicago is great. All right, Sylvia noted in the chat that she would like 4. And let's see. I'm just looking at our participant list. Abraham, do you have a room that you would like to join?
I'm not sure. I am in Ohio.
You're in Ohio?
Yes,
How
in a
about
small
in
town.
how about Indiana? All right. Okay. Let's see. Carolyn from Tennessee. Where would you like to join? Maybe Southern Illinois.
Okay, number 1.
All right, let's do it. All right. Let's see. Ruthie, where would you like to go? Ruthie, are you still I think we